Our surveying app, Flow Mobile Surveying, can be customized in lots of different ways. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can customize the data collection side of things, whether it be on the mobile app or on the dashboard. I'll also show you what's possible in terms of the types of input and so on. So when we build templates, we like to split things into what's called sections. And this just makes the data entry a bit easier, a bit more bite-sized. And you can see here on this demo template that I've got set up, we have various sections that we're going to complete during the course of this demo, just to explain a different principle when it comes to data collection. So let's start with the first one. Now, this is to illustrate sections themselves. So there are two types of sections. There's a single form section. If I open this up, you'll see this is just a single form with 3 different inputs. And this is useful if you only need to enter something once. Next, we have a multi-item section. You can see when I open this up that we're presented with a different screen. In this case, it's a list because we can have multiple items. If I click the Add Item button, you can see it's the same form as we had before. However, we can actually create more than one of these. If I click Save, there's our first item. You can see I can add another one, and so on. So this is the other type of section you can have. It's called a multi-true section. So a template will be built up of various sections. Some of them will be a single form, like that first one I showed you, and some of them will be a multi-true form. In other words, where you can have lots of different items. Next, let's look at the input types. So on a form, you can have various input types. I'd like to go through each one in turn. First of all, we've got a simple text field. I'm going to type my name in here. Next, you can see we have a text area. This is the same as the text field, but it has a bit more height. So it's good if you expect to have a long paragraph or something like that. In this case, maybe a single line text field just isn't appropriate. We need a bit more space. It's worth noting as well that a text field can also kind of act like a text area as well. If the text was to bust out of this single line, it would go down to the next line, as you see here. You can also use a carriage return, just the way I've done, just to add multiple lines. So these are effectively the same type of thing. It's just a visual difference, really. Next, we have checkbox inputs. So this is just a simple yes checkbox. We tend to use checkboxes for things like lab results ready. So you can fill out the form up to this point, and then when the lab results are ready, you tick the box, and we can add some conditional logic to then show the rest of the form. That's a great use of a checkbox. Next, we have some number inputs. Now the difference here is an integer is a whole number, for example 10, but I can't put a decimal point. It just won't let me do that. A float, on the other hand, can have a decimal point, so it could be something like 10.1, 10.2, and so on. It's worth noting that the little up down icons will increment by 1, so you can sort of go up and down by 1 just by pressing these buttons. And that's different to a text input, so it's a bit of extra functionality when it comes to numbers. Next is what I like to call the strict select inputs. So these are for cases where you have a fixed list and you don't want your users to deviate from that list. So they could be a bit restrictive in the sense that it doesn't give your surveyors much flexibility. They can't choose something outside of the list. But if the options will only ever be that list, it's a great choice. For example, you might export your data to a third-party system and you can't have options outside of a certain list. In those cases, a select or the tabs that I'm about to show you would be an excellent choice. So if I click the select field, you can see we have various options which we can select from the drop-down. And for the tabs, it's the same kind of behavior. We have 3 options here, option 1, option 2, option 3. The only difference is that these are all visible, so it just takes 1 click as opposed to 2. Select drop-downs are the most suitable when you have a longer list. In those cases, tabs just aren't going to be suitable. They're going to take up too much space on the form. Tabs are a great choice if you have perhaps 5 or less options, I would say, at the most. Now the next thing to mention is select drop-downs and tabs can also have hints. So here at the bottom we have what's called a default hint. This will stay here until we choose one of the options, and it's a great little way to give tips or hints to the user as to what they need to do. If I click on one of these options, the hint has replaced itself with a specific hint for that option. So if you had some sort of risk scale, for example, low, medium and high, the hints underneath could explain exactly what meets those criteria and what does justify that risk score. Next, we have an image input. So if I click on this choose file, if I'm on the dashboard, I can select an image from my computer. Likewise, from the mobile app, I can select one from the gallery, or in this case, from my phone itself, so I can actually take a picture with the native camera. Let's select an image from the gallery here. The signature input is the other type of image. In this case, you have a different icon, which you can use to simply draw on your signature like this. The behavior is slightly different on the dashboard. In this case, you get a choose file button as opposed to this little draw icon. Next, we have the date and time inputs. So if we choose the date and click on this, we're given this calendar, and we can simply select a date from the calendar. The time allows us to just type the time in, like so. And the date time is a combination of both. So I can click on this to get the date, and then type in the time afterwards. Next, we have what are called info inputs. So these are informational blocks that we can add. We often do this to break up the form in some way. For example, you'll see this form has various info blocks to break up these different sections like so. And this is helpful just to explain the context of the fields underneath. So we can add a bold info block, as you can see here. We can have a simple one. This is another bold info block. And then we have a link here as well. So we can click on this, it would take us straight to that site. Finally, we can also add an image within the form itself. This isn't something we use very often, but it can be good if you want to include something like risk scores and their explanations as some sort of image. So the next thing I want to show you is how you can add drop-down options to a text input. I'm going to come out of here and I'm going to go into this section here. So you can see this text input is just like a normal text input, except we have this little magnifying glass on the right hand side. If I click this, I'm presented with some options, just like a select drop down. So I can select one from this drop down, and that text input is now filled in. However, there's nothing to stop me from just typing whatever I want into here. So I have the flexibility of a text box, but the speed advantages of a select drop down all in one input. And you can do this with text areas too. So you can see here we have various options. These are a bit longer because we expect to put more text in here. But like I say, there's nothing to stop you from putting options on a text area like I've done here too. The next thing I'd like to show you is conditional logic. Conditional logic is used to hide and show different parts of a form depending on what you've put in. So let's have a look here at this conditional logic. The first question is asking whether the vehicle type is a car or a bicycle. If I tap one of these, I'm presented with some more fields. So that's the conditional logic at play. And you can see here we have these shared attributes, I've called them. And then we have the specific car attributes. So if I switch from car to bicycle, you'll see exactly what that means. Bicycle has those same shared attributes, but it has its own bicycle attributes, of course, because there are different questions to ask for a car and a bicycle. However, some of the things are actually the same, and we want to show those regardless. So conditional logic like this can be used to make it very obvious the kind of information you need to enter onto the form by just showing what you actually need to put in. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about is grouping. We can control the way that multi-item sections are grouped. So in my example, I've got two sections here. They contain the same information, but they're actually grouped in a different way. So let's look at the first one. This is grouped by vehicle type. Now I have all my bicycles grouped together, and I've got all my cars grouped together. I've also added some logic to determine how the items are rendered as well. So in this case, it's the manufacturer, the type of bike, and the size for a bike. But for a car, it's the manufacturer and also the engine size. So we've changed the way the item looks depending on whether it's a car or a bike. Let's look at a different grouping. This is the same information, but this time grouped by manufacturer. So you can see here we have a Giant bicycle, a Honda car, a Nissan car, a Peugeot bicycle and a Peugeot car, and a Specialized bicycle. So it's the same information, grouped differently, this time with the manufacturer as the main thing you want to group on. You can also group to various levels, so we could group by manufacturer, then something else, then something else. It gets a bit more nested in that case. In these two examples, I've grouped by just a single thing. However, there's nothing to stop you from grouping by multiple things, so you have those nested groupings. As you click through, you would have group 1, and then you could expand out group 2 on this level, and so on. We recommend keeping the groupings relatively to a minimum, just to stop things from getting a bit lost. Next, we have what are called quick fills. So quick fills and presets are ways you can make the data collection quicker. Let's go through each one of them in turn. Quick fills are used when you want to fill in a form in a specific way. So for example, maybe I want to quickly add in Rufus the dog. It's going to fill in the animal type, the color, and the name because that was on my quick fill. Or let's imagine I want to fill in Purdy the cat. It's going to overwrite what I've got here. We've now got a cat, which is white, called Purdy. You'll typically know when you need a quick fill if you find yourself typing the same information over and over again when entering items. If there are those common properties or things that you end up adding for a certain item type, if you can give that configuration a name or an alias, we can create a quick fill to just fill in those fields in that way the same every single time. So just to recap, quick fills allow you to fill in a single form in a certain way by just tapping this lightning bolt here in the top right hand corner. Next is we have what are called presets. Presets work in a similar way in the sense that you can fill in something very quickly. However, presets add multiple items at once. So whereas quick fills are used to just fill in a single form, presets allow you to add multiple items all in one go. So if I click this and add preset, you can see I have this preset here for luxury cars. The icon on the right hand side says 6, and that's telling me how many items are going to be added when I click this preset. Let's go ahead and do that now. Sure enough, 6 items have been added. What you'll also notice is each item has this red highlight next to it, and that's just telling us there's something to do. In this case, we're expected to go in, make some changes, and save the item, which will remove the highlight in. So let's do that here. And we know we've checked that one over. We can move on to the next one. So presets are great if you have something like a specific list of hazards that you always want to add. However, you might also want to add some additional hazards. So you have that flexibility. You can add the items from the preset and then add individual items as and when you need to. Another good example of when you might use presets is if you're inspecting different building types. Each building type might have a different list of hazards. For example, a commercial building might have a different list of hazards to a residential building and so on. So using a preset in this way would save you from having to remember the relevant hazards for different building types because the preset has them all loaded for you. Okay, so let's head out of here. And the last thing I want to show you is presets with a prompt. So in that example before, I added 6 items using a preset. In this one, I'm going to add a new preset, but this time it's going to prompt me for some information. So if I tap Add Preset, I've got that same luxury cars preset. However, this time it's prompting me for a location. So let's pop that in. Click Save. And you can see it's added 6 items just like before. But this time it's given each one of them the same location bit of information. So if there are common fields that you want to fill in for multiple items, we can prompt for that field and save you from having to enter it each time. So this is presets, only this time with a special prompt. The last thing I'd just like to touch on is the importance of grouping. So you can see here we're grouping by location. Because we're doing that, we can click on this button here and say add preset here. I can add that same preset. It's pre-filled the location without us having to put it in because of that group level. If I click save, then we can instantly add those 6 items to that specific location. So it is good to group things in the correct way because it allows you to do things like this very quickly. So I hope you found this little masterclass on data collection helpful. We have some separate videos on dashboard modifications and also report modifications. If you'd like to see them, please check out our knowledge base. If you're a Flow Mobile Surveying user, I hope this has been helpful in giving you an understanding of what's possible within the system. If you're not a Flow Mobile Surveying user and you'd like us to create some sort of template for you, please get in touch and we'd be happy to walk you through that. I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration. All the best. Bye bye.